I disappeared for 15 months. I went out on the ice of Lake
Came back a different
Michigan,
person.
cross-country skiing,
Hmm.
planted my skis, and then disappeared for 15 months. And then after that, I reemerged in Massachusetts, where I'm from. Um, yeah, so it was about 15 months that I was gone, and I assumed a different identity. I called myself Nathan T. Stanfield, and yeah, there are lots of different experiences during my disappearance.
So, without giving away everything that's in the book, you went out on the ice and you had a revelation, and then you just assumed this different identity and just disappeared from
Well,
everybody.
yeah, yeah. Well, it wasn't just me. It was a conspiracy. I and a number of other people decided we wanted to change the world. We wanted and the way we thought we would do it is that I should go underground and start a people's resistance movement. And the other conspirators would become leaders in finance, become billionaires, political leaders, and also religious leaders. And at some point in the future, decades later, we would combine our forces and then we would change the world to become more democratic, uh, more free, etc. That was sort of the thinking. So it was not just me disappearing; it was a conspiracy
Mm.
of us to try to dramatically change the world in the future. We had studied lots of different kinds of revolutions and attempts at change, and we thought our approach would be very different because we would be operating both at a kind of legitimate level. There were various people, again, kind of doing the legitimate thing, gaining power in politics and finance, et cetera, whereas I would be underground, developing like a people's resistance movement, being with the poor, the downtrodden, the starving. And hopefully that would then galvanize and we would get together and, yeah, change things.
And this was like the late 70s, so the Vietnam War had been over. It's before the Iraqi
Oh, yeah, it's
war.
way before Iraq. The
Yeah,
Vietnam War
way
ended
before.
around 73, I forget.
Yeah,
Anyways, yeah, but there was a lot going on. I mean, it's
always.
after the Martin Luther King time. There was a lot of, it's the 60s. Before that was the 60s, a lot of upheavals and a lot of changes in society.
Hi, Stephen. Welcome to the Awaken Heart podcast.
Hi, Nancy. Great to meet you. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks. And thank you for being persistent. I had taken a really hiatus over the summer and the fall to catch up on a lot of editing. And you were definitely somebody that I wanted to talk to.
Mhm.
And then we
Yeah.
just kept communicating. And finally, I opened up the calendar and here you are. So
Yeah. Voila.
welcome. Yeah. See, perfect timing. So I'm really excited about this conversation. It's really, I don't think I've had anything, I guess, like you with this experience on this podcast. And
Mhm.
before we dive in, I just want to name something about this conversation. This isn't a story you rush to tell. It lived quietly for decades. What stayed with me in reading your work wasn't the mystery, it was the restraint. The
Mhm.
choice to live quietly was something extraordinary for so long. So, before we talk about what happened,
Mhm.
I'm curious about how you lived afterward. And you've spoken
Mhm.
about praxis, the making real of ideas live
Mhm.
through lived action. When did you realize that thinking alone wasn't enough for you?
I've been doing that since I probably was a teenager. Okay, I mean, it's a long history. Actually, as a teenager, I went to a prep school, Deerfield Academy, and in the senior year, we had a mock political convention. This is 1972, and I and a friend of mine wanted to amend the Constitution, and we brought all kinds of policies in front of the mock convention. We had actually a senator from Alaska who was, galvanizing, and we were out of order, and we were thrown out. We were actually taken out of the convention at Deerfield. So yeah, I've been sort of kind of rebellious all my life in lots of ways and challenging the system. I haven't spoken about the disappearance for, I don't know, must be 47 years because I didn't want to be defined by it, but also I didn't want the co-conspirators to be defined by it. When I reemerged, I feigned amnesia. That seemed to be the easiest way out to not kind of be pursued and perhaps even prosecuted, and also to protect my conspirators, who also would have been in trouble, and their lives would have probably been very changed than they were. So part of it was to protect them. And also, I wanted to go on with my life. I wanted to not be defined by that event, though a lot of my ideas and theories that I've developed since then kind of have their roots at that time in my writings and experiences.
Mhm.
So since then, geez, what did I do? I worked at a after I reemerged, I worked at a financial trading center in Massachusetts, then went to study German again, German graduate school. That was kind of interesting because I was thinking of going back into engineering, and I I was taking a German class, and the German teacher said, "Hey, you ever think of taking graduate school in German?" I said, "No, not really." He said, "Well, we have free assistantships and tuition waivers." And I said, "Where do I sign up?" So that's how I got into back into German, and that led then to studying linguistics. So I got a master's in linguistics at Ohio University, and lived in Saudi Arabia for a year, and then
Wow.
I married during the time, and wanted then to understand more about myself in relationships. I felt kind of like most men, a total idiot. And I was tired of my wife knowing so much more than I did about all that. So that was one of the motivations behind becoming a psychologist. But I also wanted to really understand the micro. I want to understand what motivates people and why they do what they do. And because before that, my focus was on macro issues, economics, philosophy, politics, history, and not so much on the individual.
Mm.
So I got into clinical psychology. I've had an active practice for decades. I was a professor for many years. And also during that time, I did a lot of training in different kind of spiritual modalities, meditation, shamanism, acupuncture, a whole variety of different things. I had ended up becoming a chairman at the Department of Psychology at Bastyr University, which is a well-known naturopathic university. That's where they teach people a kind of alternative sort of type of medicine. They teach acupuncture there, etc. And eventually left academia, and I got fired. We can always get into that why. Uh, that was kind of interesting experience. And well, and I'm glad I did get fired. Lots of times, you think terrible things happen to you, and you're pretty upset about it. My wife had cancer at the time, and it was actually a great thing because I went into full time practice, which was good. And I also started writing again. I started really getting into writing, and so that's back in 2004. I started getting into all the writing that's eventually led to to the disappearance. And the disappearance took a few years to write. I had a helper, somebody helped me with it. Dylan Quarles helped me with the writing, but most of it is mine.
So let's walk it back a little bit.
Sure.
So, with your writing and the disappearance, the conspiracy revelation,
Mhm.
and you disappeared for it was a year, but metaphorically, you disappeared for like 45 years, right? You
No, no,
weren't
well, I disappeared for 15 months.
right.
I went out on the ice of Lake
Came back a different
Michigan cross
person.
country skiing,
Hmm.
planted my skis, and then disappeared for 15 months. And then after that, I reemerged in Massachusetts, where I'm from. Um, yeah, so it was about 15 months that I was gone, and I assumed a different identity. I called myself Nathan T. Stanfield, and yeah, there are lots of different experiences during my disappearance.
So, without giving away everything that's in the book, because it sounds like it reveals itself over time. What led to so you went out on the ice and you had a revelation and then you just assumed this different identity and just
Mhm.
like disappeared from
Well,
everybody.
yeah, yeah. Well, it wasn't just me. It was a conspiracy. I and a number of other people decided we wanted to change the world. We wanted
Mhm.
and the way we thought we would do it is that I should go underground and start a people's resistance movement. And the other conspirators would become leaders in finance, become billionaires, political leaders, and also religious leaders. And at some point in the future, decades later, we would combine our forces and then we would change the world to become more democratic, more free, etc. That was sort of the thinking. So it was not just me disappearing, it was a conspiracy
Mm.
of us to try to dramatically change the world in the future. We had studied lots of different kinds of revolutions and attempts at change, and we thought our approach would be very different because we would be operating both at a kind of legitimate level. There were various people, again, kind of doing the legitimate thing, gaining power in politics and finance, et cetera. Whereas I would be underground, developing like a people's resistance movement, being with the poor, the downtrodden, the starving. And hopefully that would then galvanize and we would get together and, yeah, change things.
And this was like the late '70s, so the Vietnam War
Yeah.
had been over. It's before the Iraqi
Oh, yeah, it's
war.
way before Iraq. The
Yeah,
Vietnam War
way
ended
before.
around
Yeah,
73, I forget.
yeah,
Anyways, yeah, but there was a lot going on. I mean, it's
always.
after the Martin Luther King time, there was a lot of, it's the 60s, before
Mhm,
that was the 60s, a lot of
mhm,
upheavals and a lot of changes in society. And, things were pretty bad back then with authoritarianism and environmental destruction, but,
mhm.
things are like a thousand times worse now than they were
Oh
back
my
then.
gosh.
And
There's
they were
so
still
much.
pretty bad back then.
Were you able to affect change during that time? Or
Well, not really.
young guy with
Yeah,
the big ideas?
the book is about my journey, about how I plan to develop this sort of people's movement and kind of the different steps I took to do that, and then essentially my inability to do it because it meant changing who I was as Nathan. You might say I was kind of peering over the abyss of dark into darkness and sociopathy, and I nearly fell in. And I guess only some inherent goodness within me. And then I think the goodness that I connected with, what I call now the multiverse and those interdimensional beings, kind of helped guide me. And in the end, I couldn't do what I was supposed to do. And that was the end of we call ourselves the Next Holistic Revolutionary Front. I know that's kind of a weird thing to talk. That's how things were talked about back then. And that was the end of that. Basically, the end came when I joined. Within join, I was in the French Foreign Legion, just towards
Wow.
and uh, I witnessed a brutal beating, almost a killing, and then I had this vision of what would happen if I decided to go down that road. It wasn't very good. It was a terrible road to go down. Side visions of me killing all sorts of killing and very bad things.
Mm,
People. Eventually, an underground organization. It was kind of an interesting vision. It was so quick, and you know, uh, I was sort of this symbol of the wandering monk was pasted all over these cities, and I don't know. It was just and I realized what was going to happen, and so then I fled. I left the French Foreign Legion and returned back to the States, and eventually reemerged. But between the disappearance on the ice and that were 15 months of other adventures in Japan and attempts to and uh, experiences with brujos and Zen masters and just a whole variety of different things. And on the ice itself, I had it's kind of hard to describe. I had interdimensional experience, kind of
I was just gonna ask
Nathan
about
T.
that.
Stanfield left the ice and went down to Mexico, but I was still there, and it's hard to say what happened. I think now I look back at it, it's kind of like I entered some kind of interdimensional space. I wasn't picked up by any UFOs. I mean,
Mhm.
that's the sort of thing that people talk about. Was he picked up by you? No, I wasn't picked up by your traditional UFO. No, I kind of entered this interdimensional space and kind of was in this like energy shell with these sort of beings of light who kind of, I don't know, it's hard to explain, kind of communicated in color and light and energy, and kind of, this was sort of absorbed by me. I kind of sort of became a being of light itself. And yeah, I think a lot of information kind of was downloaded, and maybe that's what I've been working on. It's a little hard, unclear, though I've had experiences since then with these beings of light. So
So that happened on your ice before your decision to
no, no, my
leave.
decision to disappear had already
It
happened
already
way
happened,
before we had planned.
but this happened on the
Probably a
ice.
year before that, maybe not quite a year. The conspiracy was developed, and then once they went out there, but this was unexpected.
Mhm.
The interdimensional experience on the
Right.
ice was
It
was
usually is.
unexpected. I was not expecting that. I was just expecting of leaving my skis and walking off the ice.
It must have felt like a validation of what you
Yeah, it
were
did.
about
It
to
did. It
do.
felt like I was that I was doing what I was supposed to do. I've kind of always been kind of driven all my life. I felt like kind of guided in some odd way.
Mhm.
It's hard to explain, but yeah, like I said, I've always been a person of action, and the people I was with were quite remarkable people. And I think there was an interesting kind of synchronicity, or even you might call a quantum entanglement of all of us being together and kind of being on the same page. And normally that kind of thing just doesn't happen.
Mhm. Mm. So, after all of that, and you've had such amazing lived experience in that 15 months and then afterwards. So you returned and you lived this experience quietly for decades. What did silence allow that speaking earlier might not have?
Well, it allowed me to kind of figure it out over time because there was just so much packed in there, and especially what I call now the multiverse experiences,
Mhm.
and it took a long time to make sense of that. And also, I just, there was a part of me, at least early on, probably first 10 years or so, I just didn't want to be defined by my disappearance. When I reappeared, I had, offers from TV, movie to make movies and all kinds of things. I rejected them all because again, I wanted my life to move on forward and yet not, deny what happened. But in some ways I had to deny what happened. Oh, there's a little kitty. Hi,
Of
kitty.
course.
and
Doors
and
closed.
probably, like it was funny when I was in graduate school in psychology, I was teaching a introductory psych class, and in this introductory psychology book, my name appeared under amnesia. And one of the students said, is that you? And I'm there, what? Are you kidding me? How could that be me? Like, I'm a graduate student. I'm going to get a doctorate.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and then eventually I'm 71, probably in my late 60s. I starting to write the book. It just felt like the right time to get this out because I think it could be useful to young people. I think it's a coming of age story. And I think, it's all about trying to make the world a better place. Yeah. Was I deluded in lots of ways? Were we deluded? We not, were there things obviously not right about what we were doing? For sure. I would never argue otherwise.
So I want to take it back to the multiverse because this is something I'm
Mhm.
fascinated with quantum entanglements
Uh-huh.
and the multiverse and interdimensional beings. Get
Mhm.
down. So how does that look? How would you I mean, I don't know if you can really explain it because it appears different for different people, but how did it show up for you, the multiverse? Like how did you interpret it?
Well, in the beginning, I had a sort of vague understanding of it. I had studied some quantum mechanics back at, the 20s and stuff, but I didn't really have a really good understanding of it until a lot later when I kind of studied that phenomena. I think one of the problems with explaining these experiences, many people have a lot of different experiences in the transcendental or multiverse world. And I think problem is language. We all have our own interpretations of what's going on. And, people, for example, in ancient societies, the shamanic societies, it wasn't uncommon for people to have encounters with spiritual beings or forces or however you describe them. And they will often think of these as benign.
Mhm.
And things might be energy or objects might be placed in them, or at least interpreted as objects. And now there is very little knowledge about spirituality, especially there's an ignorance. And so when people have these sort of interdimensional experiences, they can, they're very fearful. They can be very scary, and I think that fear gets projected onto the experience. And so instead of it being a benign experience, the beings are seen as, evil reptiles, inserting things in their body and doing all kinds of weird surgical things to them.
Mhm.
Again, that's sort of what happens in shamanic practices, but not in this sort of evil, negative way. But I think it has a lot to do with kind of who you are and your personality, understanding of how you then experience this. And of course, our personal histories, whatever religion you're brought up, etc., gets projected. People hundreds of years ago in Christianity saw Jesus everywhere or devils, and we now see more aliens and UFOs.
Hmm.
But the multiverse, if you want me to get into the
I
multiverse,
do.
I and a mathematician friend wrote a book on the metamathematics of existence. You can find that on Amazon. And what we did is we looked at Gödel's. Gödel was a famous mathematician who was a contemporary of Einstein, and he developed two mathematical proofs that prove that existence is incomplete, uncertain, and contradictory inherently. Everything, all ideas, thoughts, all physical matter, the universe, everything is always constantly changing. And you might think, well, yeah, so what, that's sort of, but it's not really obvious. A lot of people are into certainty and want certainty. And I find certainty to lead to authoritarianism and to obviously to terrible things that happen in our society. But so on based on Gödel's work, Brian and I, the mathematician, developed two theorems. One is called the theorem of totality, where if you take Einstein's idea of Gödel's ideas of incompleteness, everything's incomplete and sufficient, and you do that infinitely, then you say, what's in our universe? Well, there's something to complete is outside of that universe. And what's outside of that universe? If you go infinitely, you end up with an infinite number of universes, infinite number of dimensions, and realities. And this is kind of a mathematical proof for the multiverse. The multiverse is probably the major paradigm in physics to explain kind of reality for us. And so many physicists believe there are many, many universes or infinite universes and dimensions. And so I think in these many universes, many of them are fairly incomprehensible. If you think of infinity, how can we understand it? We can only understand very little. And in these incomprehensible parts are probably where a lot of spiritual experiences occur that cannot be scientifically validated. But the multiverse creates an umbrella. So all the different religions, spiritualities can have an actual physical place in existence. So that's why I think the multiverse is important, because then it gives credence that there are other beings and forces that are higher dimensions or in other universes that possibly may have some effect on us.
So you can be, well, I remember there was this TV show, it was awesome. Everywhere and
Mhm.
Everything and Everywhere All at
Yeah.
Once. Did you see
Uh-huh.
that? That was
Yeah,
so
a
well
little bit.
done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So funny. She was so
Oh, yeah,
funny.
yeah. She's very funny. Great actress.
So, like, you can all of a sudden be in another reality or another time. The multiverse, everything is well, everything happens now, 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 now. Um, or is it another state of consciousness that you arrive at a multiverse? How do you feel
Well, I think there
that
are,
is?
infinite number of yous, and we can connect
Yeah.
with those other yous, I think, at times. Sometimes this
The other
happens in
you is
dreams.
a lady
Pardon?
who lunches. She doesn't
Right.
have to work.
Right, right. Well, that's TV. I don't know if that's actually,
Yeah.
really happening, but we're always in. I call it constructive dissociation. We're always entering states of dissociation. When we're dreaming, we're dissociated. Meditation is a form of dissociation. When we're walking and talking to ourselves and somewhere else, we're dissociating. When we're driving and somehow we got from A to B and we can't figure it out,
Mhm.
we were dissociating. We're constantly dissociating. Okay. And the question of, constructive dissociation is where we can maybe enter these other realms through what a lot of physicists believe is quantum consciousness. The negative types of dissociation are like post-traumatic stress disorder, which are also dissociative, but in a very negative way. So I think we are always kind of in connection with the multiverse, but we just don't know it. Sometimes this
Mhm.
happens in dreams. Sometimes this happens in people having kind of quantum entanglements where they know something before it ever happens or connect with somebody. I think lots of times people are drawn to each other and they can't understand why. And
Mhm.
I think that may have something to do with this sort of connecting at the quantum world. But when you to enter a state of quantum consciousness, the mind either needs to become simpler. So, like in dreaming, it becomes less chaotic and simpler, or like in meditation, which then allows the brain, the neural nets, to enter the state of called quantum coherence, that leads then to the sense of quantum consciousness that connects us with all the multiverse. But
Mhm.
the problem is that even though we may be open to the infinite possibilities of existence, we are constrained and limited by who we are. We're finite creatures and we have finite knowledge. And so our knowledge restrains or constrains what we can experience. There's some things that are happening we just can't make sense of. And so we don't even know they happen in the
Mhm.
multiverse. So this is why then people's experience in the multiverse usually has something to do with their prior history, religious history, personal histories. This colors what happens and where you go and what universes and dimensions and kind of forces or beings you deal with. One of the other mathematical theorems that Brian and I developed to kind of counterweight the theorem of totality of the multiverse and all its dizziness and wildness is called the theorem of boundary conditions, that in order for anything to exist, there must be boundaries, structure, limitations. And that's important to see this balance between the finite and infinite, between all the possibilities that are around us all the time. And yet, we don't have witches flying in the air. At least I don't see them, all the time. We don't have pigs flying. Our universe has certain constants, and that they're breakable and bendable to some degree. And we haven't figured out why, though there's lots of theories around how to do that. I mean, obviously, there's all kinds of sci-fi like Star Trek that kind of go into, going fast at the speed of light
Mhm.
to enter these other multiverses. We just don't have right now any physical way of doing that, but we do have a mental way of doing that.
Mhm.
And we're doing
Conscious.
that all the time when we
Yep.
enter these states of quantum consciousness.
Mhm. And there's those experiences where I don't know, I've had it where time I know when I've taken gummies or a little portion of a gummy,
Uh-huh.
I can't do it because I'll sit down and watch something and I know everything even though I've never seen it before, I'm like, "I know I've seen this whole thing.
Hmm.
This is gonna happen, this person here." I'm like, "Oh, I gotta stop taking it." But literally,
Ah,
it's like I go
interesting.
into the future. I'm like, "Okay, I
Yeah.
just timeline jumped or
Yeah,
something."
yeah, yeah. I
It's
think
very
people are doing
uncomfortable.
this all the time. Like, I have timeline jumps, and I've worked with other beings. The book, the Disappearance, talks about my experiences with jaguar, which is a power animal that helps
Mhm.
me escape. When I was in Mexico, I was working in a kind of dojo but part of the dojo was connected with sort of brujos, shamans, but kind of sorcerer types and kind of negative, and they, I don't know, they were trying to take things from me from my other lives and other things, and the jaguar appeared before me, and I became one with the jaguar, and it helped me escape and helped me then go to my next step in my disappearance, which was then to Japan. But I
Mhm.
think there are, and there's always just been this dark presence since I was young. The book talks about that, and sometimes you can explain it as sort of a shadow, or kind of Freudian it did. But I felt that there was something kind of dark, and in my during the disappearance, I met what I call the dark monk, which is this sort of being or presence that's into power and energy. And wanting to dominate, and believes in he calls it's kind of funny, compassionate ruthlessness. That's kind of an oxymoron, compassion, ruthlessness to put together, but the means justifies the end. And at first I tried to identify with that, but eventually, like I said, I peered into darkness, and I was redeemed. I didn't go down that road, and I met other beings, the jaguar, the wandering monk, who's very different, and it's very
Do you
lots of
think
things.
yeah, a lot of things. And I've also heard when you walk into another room and you forget why you're there, you just had another timeline jump or your alternate person has stepped in. There's so many interesting things and I know there's a lot of study around it right now with
Mhm,
like what Joe Dispenza is doing in the Heart Math Institute and
mhm,
Greg Braden is on the forefront. It's just so fascinating and I think we've lost a lot of that over
mhm.
the years in this Western society, we're so in our mind and we're not
Right.
connected to nature or the earth
Yes.
or the cycles or willing to surrender to the mysteries of life and be connected to that.
No, no, yeah, you're absolutely right. I when I go hiking, sometimes I do something I call being in many places at the same time, and as I'm
Mhm,
hiking, I can connect with my being somewhere else in some other universe,
mhm,
connecting with certain very odd beings, structures, and sort of at the same time. And I think you can develop that. These are all trainings that have a long history, in spirituality and meditation and shamanism and guided visualization, hypnosis, etc. And these are all things anyone can learn to do and develop, and we actually do them spontaneous, like you said, like you're
mhm,
talking about. But what idea of I embrace the multiverse is because I think it's our science of the time, and the ancient religions were based on the science of their time. And I think it's, not that, like I said, the multiverse can contain, probably there's a heaven there somewhere, or a hell, or who knows, or there's
mhm.
the Buddha realms. I don't know. They're probably all there somewhere, um, and people experience them. But I think trying to getting away from all the negative history of religion is not a bad idea, because religion has a lot of baggage to it and continues to have a lot of baggage. Lots of, millions and millions of people are killed in the name of
Yes.
God, or whoever,
Yes.
and I think, the multiverse kind of helps. Let's move on from that, and let's get into the methodologies that are not so defined by integrated with other political ideologies and
Mhm.
authoritarianisms and other things like that.
Yeah, I find that I mean, I was raised Catholic, but it was like we were able to choose, but it was like not that hell and brimfire. Well, that's Baptist. But
Mhm,
it was just like a loving God, he's a forgiving God, and we got to choose like if we want to do our confirmation and all that. But I find, and I've traveled the world myself, so much bloodshed has happened. I'm like, that's not
mhm.
my God. My God is not, anyone
Yeah,
that's shed in the name of God blood,
mhm,
it's not the kind of God I'm following.
yeah.
And we know how many of them were based on control. I mean, why were there only four gospels taken? I still don't understand. Like,
Right, right, right.
we won't get into
No.
that right now, but seriously, it's like there's
Mhm.
four gospels out of how many did they
Yeah,
take out?
right, right,
Okay,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's a whole selection process they went through to develop a
exactly.
certain ideology. I think one of the interesting things about the multiverse also is that it can help guide us. The multiverse is all about diversity, there's
Mhm,
all these infinite worlds. It's all about curiosity and exploring, and it's also about connection and relating. That if you the more you connect, the more real you are, and generally the happier people are. The more you might say the multiverse kind of is, it's kind of modeled after love. I mean, if we were looking from a human perspective, that love is all about acceptance and connecting
mhm.
as much as you can. And I think embracing the multiverse kind of has that kind of quality to it. Unlike kind of what's going on, which is, all the divisiveness and the hatred and
On
anger,
purpose.
all these negative emotions, versus the positive emotions. And I think of this as part of the cult of individualism, of this hyper
Mhm,
extreme individualism that you see where the only focus is on me, and this lack of realization that we are social creatures, that the reason why anything works is because we're social creatures. I mean, you look at any corporation, even mobsters, okay? There's a sense of sociability. You have to trust people. You expect people to do things. People do, at work, I have clients who work at Amazon and other places, Microsoft, and sometimes people work 90 hours a week. Why do they work 90 hours a week, right? Well, yeah, they get paid fairly well, but obviously they're not getting paid to, have
yeah,
giant yachts like Jeff Bezos. But anyways, people go the extra mile, and that's about 95% of the people, but there's about 5% of the people who are predators.
mhm.
And it's a predatory economics we live under. And
And
these
they're in places
5%
of
are
government.
sociopaths and narcissists and have no sense of caring or anything. They know how to manipulate the people who know
Mhm.
how to trust. They manipulate the social people without, and it's and sometimes they're extremely charming, and you just, oh, yeah, okay.
And they're
Sorry, I
in
went on there a
positions
little
of
bit.
power. No, they are. No, we see it. The psychopaths and the sociopaths are all in these positions of power.
I
And
know.
we're
Yeah.
just seeing them as well. I mean, we've known a lot of this stuff with the Epstein files, but
Right.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
but with this,
Yeah.
I love this. I love all this about consciousness and being
Hmm.
ready and readiness. And the biggest illusion is that we're separate and that we're
Hmm.
actually all connected. And that's hard for people to really realize because it's been, like you said, there's division. It's you. No, we're blaming everybody else for our
Hmm.
own problems. We're not putting responsibility on ourselves, but we're not separate. We're connected.
Yeah.
And when we feel connected, we feel much more at ease and peace within ourselves.
Yeah. This extreme individualism actually undermines individualism because it makes us get into this negative space of paranoia and distrust. And also because we're not as connected and attached with one another as we are, we're more easily manipulated and
Mhm.
controlled by the sociopaths.
Mm.
I have people working in large corporations I work with who would love to like unionize or do something like that. Are you kidding me? They'll be fired immediately. And they
Mhm.
know that. And there's this lack of community that's,
Mhm.
I mean, there are community, there are people, things are going on in Minnesota. Clearly there's a sense of community
Catching up.
other places. But when you look at these large corporations, there's this tremendous fear of, there's no unions. People get, I mean, people are really dehumanized. I mean, who should be working 90 hours a week? I mean, but I see that all
Nobody.
the time. And, yeah, it's very hard. I come from a lower middle class family, and my father went on strike several times, one time for over a year. And so I kind of know what, I worked in factories. I worked in tobacco in 105-degree heat and under tents when I was 13. I mean, I have a real kind of, I call proletariat workers background, you say. And so, yeah, I see I see these injustices like you're talking about.
Mhm. And there's also the push with all this division. It's on purpose because the one world government and they're trying to control us. It's like, leave us alone. Yeah, it's all about control and divisiveness and then homogenizing cultures. So
Mhm,
before you'd always have your culture. You see them when you like might go to Bali or something. They still got their villages and community. And the
mhm,
man, when the father's done, the son takes over and there's these beautiful roles and there's this community.
mhm,
And we've lost that around
mhm.
here. You don't most of the time even know your neighbors, but
Yeah.
homogenizing cultures like Irish. I don't want to go to Ireland and not feel the culture and feel their history and just
Mhm,
have like this melting pot of people. I mean, there's going to be melting pots, but we need to preserve that.
mhm.
And we need to have our families and we need to have something other than the government because it is
Yes.
easier to be manipulated and controlled otherwise. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what's happening. We're seeing all these things roll forward and
Mhm.
let's keep fighting each other because that's not what it's about.
No, no, I agree completely.
Yes. So, going back to consciousness, do you think our culture is more ready now for conversations about expanded consciousness and non ordinary experience?
Well, I
Or
think
are
so.
we
I think there's a
still
lot of
resistant?
people that are talking about a lot of podcasts. There's lots of books. There's lots of interest in it. Obviously, there's tremendous in the movie world. So, yeah, I think they're ready. But on the other hand, there's this sort of opposite force going on at the same time. So it's kind of an interesting kind of battle, you might say, between those who really want to make the world a better place where there's diversity and connection versus those who want to dominate and control. But yeah, I see it happening a lot. I think people are yearning to connect and and be authentic with one another and open. I think uh, people are taught to be so guarded these days. You can't put certain things on Facebook. You can't say this. You can't
Yeah,
say that. Because
still.
otherwise you'll get in trouble. And of course with the surveillance state that's being developed,
Yep.
that's kind of scary.
Yep. Yep, I've had stuff censored and taken down, even when it's someone else's own
Yeah.
story. I just put something up. I don't know if it's going to be taken down and I'll get another strike on my account. Everyone's talking about these things, but somehow I always get strikes and threatened. Like, anyway, it's still happening. I know TikTok just got bought by the guy from Oracle. I don't think that's a good thing either. I don't think TikTok is a
Well,
good thing to be
Palantir
doing.
is generally not a good thing.
No.
That's for sure.
No. Yeah. Well, that's why it's so good to people are creating community now. I think
Yeah.
after what happened with COVID is people were seeing how important community was.
Yes.
And a lot of people are coming back they're coming back online, like
Hmm.
offline, online to what's important, slower, quality of life, simple things, and having family, having connections because we experienced like that crazy period of time and we don't want it to happen again, which
Right.
we all know that was a test run. Hopefully hoping we wisened up from that.
Well, hopefully, yeah. I hope we
Yes.
have.
Yes, yes. I'm gonna run for the hills.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's such a good thing.
Yeah,
So I know people are thinking about, well, maybe I need to leave the country or this or that, but I
there's
hope we can all
nowhere
stay together. There's no, the world is
there's nowhere.
changing so much and there is a sense of authoritarianism on the rise everywhere. Yeah. And it's amazing how pervasive that ideology is and captivates people. So I think people are kind of angry. They feel helpless and hopeless and people get attracted to all kinds of negative things because of that.
Mhm,
One of the things I wanted to, one of the things for me, certainty is a delusion and I think, a lot of what kind of goes on in the world is based on certainty, authority, and it's not, and it's actually less adaptive. The more certain you are, the less open you are to all the possibilities around you, and you become very narrowly focused. And this certainty actually is very harmful. This is why authoritarian systems, in some ways, in the run, don't work because there's little creativity, there's little diversity, and there's no community. There's very little community or a fake community of some sort.
mhm. Well, just a few more questions before we
Sure.
go, and I agree with all of that. Looking back now,
Mhm.
what did the disappearance and all your experiences ultimately ask you as a human being, not as a thinker or a
Mhm.
professional?
Ask me.
Like, how did your experiences shape you, like, ultimately ask of you as a human being instead of a
I,
thinker?
yeah, that's a good question. I think it's led me to become more transparent. One of the problems with the disappearance was it's very secretive. We wanted to democratize things and everything, but in some ways it was a little authoritarian. It was kind of, top down, you know, and yeah, I think radically transparent is important in public, and I think being open about our flaws. Gödel I mentioned before is theorems of incompleteness. We're all inadequate. We're all flawed. We're all insufficient. And I think being open about that, open about all the things that don't work with us, I think is incredibly important. Not just our successes. I think idealism can be tyrannical. When we have these ideals that nobody can live up to, and they become ideologies that become oppressive
Mhm,
rather than aspirations.
mhm,
And I think, the more we can all be open about, our need for one another and, and kind of what, the issues we have. We all have lots of issues. And to make believe we don't have these, I think that's what people turn to towards the grievance politics is because, they want to be able to not feel so helpless and hopeless and
mhm.
not so flawed.
Yeah, they turn towards someone or something else to fix them or to
Hmm.
to give them direction because 'cause they're not certain and they're not sure.
Right. They want
So,
certainty.
yes, and they have to
And
find that within
yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, and I think most mental illnesses, I'm a psychologist. I think most mental disorders are all based. I have a certain, I call it psychopathology of certainty. People are depressed. I work with a lot of depressed people, and one of the hardest things is to get them unattached from being depressed. They're attached to it
It's
because
identity.
it gives them structure. It
Mhm.
has a continuity.
I'm
It
depressed.
has a predictability to it, and it's very hard to get people to let go of their certainty.
Mhm. So to wrap this up, what
Sure.
question are you still living into?
I think the question I'm still exploring is trying to understand the multiverse more, my own personal connection with it, and how that might be useful to others, or maybe it's just very personal. I'm not sure. I really want to get out and be out in the mountains more. I haven't been able to do that lately because I've had some injuries, so that's very important to me to get back
Nature.
outside more than I have been. Um, yeah, I want to get. I'm trying to get some books published. That's sort of my way of trying to contribute, to change, to make things better. But I still need probably to get out there more and get in some demonstrations. My wife does that regularly, and I think yeah, I should I should join. So what's the problems?
So demonstrations as far as for change.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm,
Get more actually, out there more,
mhm.
and I think that's yeah, that's a definite challenge for me. It's
N
much more easier just to write.
Now where you are, you're mentioning mountains, and I know you're 3 hours behind. Where are you, in California?
I'm in Seattle, and
Oh,
so
okay.
Mount Rainier is not very far
Oh,
away,
it's
and I've
beautiful.
summited that mountain many times. It's a glaciated mountain.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I lived in Portland for a little bit. I lived in
Mhm.
California
Oh,
mainly, and
okay.
then
So I've been up Mount Hood too, and so yeah. Anyways, yeah, there's a lot of incredible mountains around us with glaciers. The
beautiful
Mount Rainier is
nature.
one of the few well, it's like the only mountain I think in the 48 states that's well, there's some stuff in Glacier Peak, but that
Mhm.
it's a glaciated mountain that you can go up.
So you have to use crampons for it?
Oh yeah, crampons, all kinds of
I
good
did that in
science.
Patagonia. It's beautiful,
Yeah,
like the blue ice.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
It's
kind of
funny I
exciting.
didn't get to explore while I was up in the
Uh-huh.
Pacific Northwest because COVID happened. I wasn't allowed to travel anywhere.
What a bummer.
Where's your mask? I'm like, "I'm alone in the forest. You go
Well,
on your own
oh,
way."
I remember hiking with
Yes.
masks, and I'd have my
It was
mask off and somebody come by and they look
oh,
at me if I didn't put my mask back on, like, they're
I
like,
was not
I'm
even
like,
gonna
why are we having masks out in the middle of nowhere? You,
I
you
was
think
not even gonna
actually
entertain that. Yeah, I
the
wasn't even gonna entertain I wasn't even gonna play that game. There was no
I
mask
know, I
on.
know. Well, people look at you kind of weird, so I didn't have it on, when I'm hiking, or even for people who didn't look at me weird that but yeah, I didn't want to upset people, have them.
They're upsetting themselves, like,
Well,
"We
but
are in
I don't want
nature."
them running off some space off the trail and
I've had that
falling and
happen.
smashing their head or
I've had someone
whatever.
scrabble up a I'm like,
Yeah, right. Because because you don't have your mask on. So, anyways,
"Anyway."
I just went along with it. In the mountains, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it was silly. It was a silly time.
It was silly, yes,
So, I would
lots of times.
love for you to let my audience know, our audience know, how to find your books and how to
Hmm.
best either find you on social
Hmm.
or a website, your books, if you have any new projects coming up.
Okay. The easiest way to find me is on my website, stevenkubacki.com. Anybody can look that up and talks a little bit more about me and the Disappearance book and other books I'm working on. You can always find my book on, all the all the booksellers, Amazon, whatever, Barnes and Noble. So yeah, that's probably the way to get hold of me or to find out more about me. But I have other projects. I'm completing a book now called The Multiverse Guides Humanity in 23 Principles. And just talked to my literary agent, and like normal, I have to cut the book in half because it's just
Part
too
one and
much.
part two?
So, anyways, yeah, I just have this tendency to, this professor in me,
Mhm,
academic in me. Yeah. So, anyways, I got to cut it in half to, I don't know, and it's kind of fun because it forces me to think about things more succinctly,
mhm.
and how they might be useful and interesting to others.
Well, you can also offer what is it, a bridge shorter? You can also offer an extended version for those that would like to go deeper, like
That's
a
true,
behind the
that's true,
scenes,
and I
yeah.
might I might do that. I might take what's not in the book, create a put just self-publish it on Amazon or something like that,
Mhm,
if people were more interested in it.
mhm.
But literary agent's very clear, no, nobody's gonna buy this book. Forget it. It's not gonna happen. You wanna
Same.
self-publish? Go ahead, but, you wanna
My
get into
dad
the
would've.
book world has really changed. It's actually quite difficult to get anything published these days
Oh,
unless
I'm
you're,
sure, because everyone's.
and yeah, if you're a movie star, you can get your memoir published tomorrow. So, but,
My dad would have been very interested in that because we had a library of 5,000 books, and he
oh, how
was
neat.
deep into philosophy, and he was
Oh.
such a he wrote he's written his own books as well, like
Yeah, like what?
dissertations.
What did he write?
There was something I know when the atom bomb was created, I think they
Oh.
wanted him on the Manhattan Project, or they wanted
Oh,
him on,
geez.
like, in Los Alamos, and I know he did a whole dissertation on the whole. I found it, I was like, "Oh
Hmm.
my god, this is on
Wow.
this is on the atom
Wow.
bomb." There was another
Jeez.
philosophy thing, I don't remember the names of the books, but
Yeah.
he donated a lot of stuff before he passed to a local John King bookstore that is a
Mhm.
specialized bookstore, and he
Mhm.
still got all this stuff because he was from Germany, so he had a lot of
Mm.
stuff on his favorite books on, like, the Third Reich and
Philosophy
quantum.
is pretty neat.
Yeah.
That's what I've studied a lot of German philosophy, and when I had my Fulbright, I studied under Jürgen Habermas. I don't know, that probably doesn't ring a bell, but
Mhm,
I think he's one of the more probably a lot of modern philosophy is it's very negative. Most stuff people are very good at finding what's wrong with the world. And it's too hard to do, okay?
mhm.
But coming up with constructive ideas and proposals and things, that's a lot more difficult. That's some why I enjoy Habermas's work. He
Hmm.
developed a book called Theory of Communications, Communicative Action. Some of my ideas are based on his stuff.
You and my dad would have had a lot to talk about.
Oh, that
I
would
would
have been
love to
fun.
make it. Well, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I would love my last question that I ask
Mhm.
everybody that's a guest here, and that is, what does it mean for you to live with an awakened heart?
What it means caring for others, and giving the best I can to others, and putting people first. I mean, we're
Mhm,
always, and putting aside my own agendas as much as and listening to others. Listening is a very difficult thing, and we're not trained very well to listen. So
mhm,
listening and accepting that people are different than you and seeing all the good things inside them, not just focusing on, what's wrong. I mean, we tend to be people tend to be incredibly judgmental, especially when they're not with the person and you hear them talking about the person behind their back, like, bah, all this sort of stuff. And I think that's not helpful. I think, we again, it's this non-acceptance of all our flaws. I think we can't accept our own inner flaws. And so when we see the flaws in others, we kind of go after them because we can't go after our own.
mhm, mhm. And people feel justified and okay doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, but giving, I think giving and caring for others, I
Mhm,
think, trying to, we don't have an economic theory of, economics isn't based on love, okay? It's, modern economics is based on extreme rationality, which is being selfish. That's how they define rational as being selfish, which of course doesn't make any sense
mhm,
whatsoever. There's actually no psychological, anthropological, or sociological support for the basic theories of modern economics that, supposedly have, that there's, most of it's all nonsense.
mhm. So that's what it means, caring, listening,
Yes.
and yeah, beautiful.
Caring and listening.
Yes, yes. All right. Well, thank you, Stephen. I
Well, thank you.
really loved having you on the Awakened Heart podcast. I hope you
Thank
have a
you.
good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate
Thank
it. You're
you.
an incredible person. You're a great interviewer, and I
Thank
enjoyed
you.
talking to you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Same here. Bye.
Yeah, bye bye.